Good morning, welcome to Thursday's Indycar on the 11th of October. I'm Gordon Ross. In today's news, we're looking at the DUP and its opposition to the chequers deal. We're also looking at the long-standing issues with Northern Ireland and the problems of the so-called frictionless border or the non-existent border, and also looking at the preparations in Scotland for independence as you see the draft of a new constitution for an independent Scottish Republic. But first, back to Northern Ireland and the Democratic Unionist Party, who have been making a lot of noise recently and trying, I think, to scare the Tories into doing what they want. Yesterday they abstained in a vote in the House of Commons. As they said to Theresa May, this was a shot across her bow, a warning shot to say that they were not messing about, they were not bluffing, that they would vote against the chequers deal if there was no guarantee that there would be a frictionless border and that Ireland, Northern Ireland, would have no extra checks for goods coming from the UK going through the borders into the Republic. So it's a complicated business, but the DUP have a strange contradictory position on this. They voted in favour of Brexit. They wanted to separate themselves from the European Union and in particular from the south of Ireland. But in doing so, they create a barrier, and this is the barrier that they don't actually want to have. So they want to be separate but not separate. They want to have trading barriers but without barriers, and they want to have a wall which doesn't exist, so that they can have exactly the same rights to trade into and out of the EU as they currently do, which is basically saying we want to leave the club but stay members. And that is almost, well, it's not almost, it's completely impossible for the EU to oblige them with, so it's not going to happen. But what will happen is that there will be a fudge. They're already moving towards this fudge, and this compromise involves every single company in the United Kingdom becoming a border post. So if you have a company, say in London, which is selling goods to Northern Ireland to be shipped through Northern Ireland and into Southern Ireland, then they would have to go through some kind of check at the place where they were made, first of all. In other words, there would need to be some kind of customs form filled out online and sent to the EU Customs Department before the shipment went off. That shipment would then go to Northern Ireland, where it would be barcode checked, or rather the truck would be barcode checked by border guards, because there would be border guards. This is the thing, you've got to have border guards in order to check the load is actually the same truck with the same barcode. So some kind of lay-by arrangement for the trucks being stopped, even if it's only for a few minutes, for a border guard of some kind of official in Northern or Southern Ireland to come up with a barcode scanner and scan it. So whether you call it a border checkpoint, an open border, or whatever you call it, there will have to be some kind of infrastructure. It's impossible for any logistics setup to operate this way without some kind of physical check. Now that leaves aside the entire problem of how do you monitor who's coming into and out of the EU and the UK, because you've got a porous border across Ireland over which anybody can travel without being checked at all. So imagine for a moment that you've got a bunch of illegal immigrants. All they have to do is show up in some beach somewhere in some remote part of the Republic of Ireland, get on a truck and drive over the border into the UK. That's basically it. They're there. They've made it. And this is the problem. You cannot do that. You can't have a frontier between a country and a group of countries like the EU. You cannot have a frontier without border checks, because you can't monitor who's going in and out of it. It's like the airport. You wouldn't have people coming in from abroad in an airport and not having their passports checked to see who they are and to make sure that you know who they are, what they're there to do, and when they're leaving. You can't do that with an open border because there's no way of monitoring any of it. So whatever the DUP claims about goods coming and going and trading, there's always going to be a need for a border, whether it's for goods or not. All they're talking about at the moment is goods. And that's it. They're not talking about anything else, just about trading in goods. That's the only thing that's important to the UK. It's trading in goods into and out of the EU. They don't seem to be interested in the security of the UK. And the European Union is stuck with some kind of weird, quasi, bizarre system where their border in the UK is wide open, where anybody can come and go, any kind of smuggling can happen. It's going to be an absolute, open season for smugglers of every description, be it human trafficking, drugs trafficking, alcohol, tobacco, bootleg, diesel, arms dealers, terrorists, you name it. Everybody will be able to flow in and out across that border freely. It's not a good idea, okay? Not a good idea at all, because the UK, with its Brexit deal, the whole point of Brexit, as I understood it, was to isolate the UK, to stop illegal immigration and to stop undesirables, as they would call them, coming into the UK, to stop all these Eastern Europeans coming over here, taking all the jobs that nobody here will do, for pay that nobody here would accept. The whole thing is a joke. So we're still left wondering what the hell will happen in Northern Ireland. No matter what happens now, there's going to be a mess. There's going to be some kind of fudge, some kind of guddle, which involves only trade and nothing to do with security, nothing to do with smuggling, nothing to do with checking for contraband or human trafficking, or even stolen goods. They'll be able to flow in and out, no problem at all, and all due to Brexit, which, of course, the Democratic Unionists have voted for, against the wishes of the majority of the people who live in Northern Ireland, incidentally. So let's leave that aside for a moment. But what happens if the DUP votes against Theresa May's checkers deal? Will she have enough to carry the day? Well, probably will, actually, because I think the Labour Party will go with the checkers deal at the moment. If they don't go with the checkers deal and the government falls, then there'll be a general election. If the DUP votes against it and Labour doesn't vote with the Tories on this, there'll be a general election. So whatever happens, if the Unionists carry out their threat, if they really are serious about this and they carry out the threat, then the government will fall, because the Tory government cannot survive this. If they cannot get this checkers deal agreed, then we'll be exiting the EU without a Brexit agreement and without a future trade deal. And at the moment, all we've got is the potential, and I say the potential, for maybe an okay type of Brexit agreement. And that means a blind Brexit. That means going out of the EU without any trade deal agreed yet, with the promise of maybe negotiating a trade deal after we are out, which actually is the normal way that this should be done. But the EU agreed. I think they went massively out of their way to agree to the UK doing both the Brexit deal and the post-Brexit trade deal in one go. But the UK has failed to do that. They've failed to come up with even the most simple thing, the backstop for Ireland. How do we deal with the border? It's either going to be a hard border or we're going to stay in the EU, because nothing else will work. It's been proved time upon number that it can't work. The only thing they're talking about at the moment is trade across the border. They're not talking about security, policing, they're not talking about smuggling and contraband, they're not talking about human trafficking, they're not talking about checking for terrorists coming and going, they're not talking about checking for Novichok poisoners coming and going. If the Novichok poisoners come in through Southern Ireland into Northern Ireland, nobody would know. Nobody would have known they'd be here. Nobody would have seen them at all. They would just have driven across the border and continued on their merry way down to Salisbury. The only thing that gave them away was the fact they flew in through an English airport and were photographed on the way through customs. So you need customs, right? You need a border check. Otherwise, you've no security. Anyway, coming back to Scotland now, and I mentioned earlier on in the preamble to this show that there are several potential Scottish constitutions being prepared, one by Commonweal. I think there is another one which I don't know about at the moment, which I can't comment on, and the one which I published a short excerpt from yesterday by Dr. Mark McNaught, who's a political science and law assistant professor at the University of Rennes. And Mark, as an American living in France, has a very good sort of vantage point to view both the independence campaign here and also the independence campaign in Catalonia. He's taken a strong interest in both. And as a result of that, Mark has spent the last 4 or 5 years working on a prototype constitution for a Scottish Republic. Now, it's a Scottish Republic because we needed a model to use. A Scottish Republic would just simply be a country without a monarch. And although we haven't taken a vote on whether we want to keep a monarch or not, the draft of this constitution is based on us having decided to drop the monarchy and become a republic, a people's republic. In other words, the people are sovereign in Scotland, which they are anyway, but this writes it into a fixed modern constitution. It guarantees the rights of individuals, it guarantees their right to a home, food, to sufficient income, to a decent job, to sufficient pension, to sufficient welfare payments, all of which to lead a dignified and fulfilling life. All things at the moment which the British government completely fails to guarantee in any way. The worst pensions in the whole of Europe at the moment, and with poverty rising everywhere, and 1 child in 4, I think it is, in Scotland now born into working poverty. The level of inequality, the level of debt rising in the UK. The UK has now got over £1 trillion worth of debt at the moment. It's equalled only by Portugal, I think, at the moment in terms of the amount of debt. And its debt to GDP ratio is now 52%. And that means that more than half of what we make every single year goes on debt. Now that's something to conjure with. So for Scotland to come up with a constitution, it needs to guarantee that people will be able to live with dignity, that they'll have a home to live in that's warm, that they can afford to run, that they have sufficient nourishment and decent food, not the crappy, cheap calories that we see in the discount shops, but decent food, healthy food for everybody. The obesity crisis that we're suffering is not from overeating, but it's from poor people eating cheap calories and not being able to afford decent food. There will be a guarantee of things like utility bills. There will be certain guarantees written into the Constitution that will protect people from fuel poverty. There will be all kinds of other responsibilities placed on us, but we will have freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble for any lawful purpose, freedom to form trade unions, free from interference of government, and a freedom from snooping. In other words, a right to privacy for everybody written into the Constitution. We will no longer be living in a police state as we do now, where everything that we do and say on here is listened to and monitored by MI5 in case we're doing something nasty. So it's a constitution which Mark has spent a lot of time on. It is based, originally the constitution would have been based on the Declaration of Arbroath, and that was used as the model for the American Constitution when it was written. And the American Constitution obviously has things in it which we wouldn't want, such as gun ownership. That wouldn't be in this. But a lot of the model that was used for the American Constitution is good, and Mark has used that as a framework and added into that certain, shall we say, uniquely Scottish moralities and expected behaviours and values. Something we hear a lot about British values all the time, but nobody actually quantifies what those are. Our Scottish values, if you like, our morality and our codes of conduct will be written into our constitution and guaranteed, so that at any point, if anybody is unhappy about anything, they can quote their human rights under the Constitution of Scotland, and they can fight their case without it being airy-fairy, like it is in the UK with no written constitution, where you cannot fight against the state because it makes the rules up as it goes along. Scotland's constitution will be flexible, though, despite having all of these rights and responsibilities written into it at the beginning. There will be flexibility in that amendments can come along which modify certain parts or certain articles so that it keeps up with modern life and it doesn't end up, as America has, with a gun law that dates back to the 17th century, which is no longer helpful in modern society. For Scotland, it's important that we have a founding document, something which declares the country to be a sovereign state where the will of the people is paramount and supreme over all others. Once that is in place and that constitution has been discussed widely by the public and agreed by perhaps another vote, then it would be adopted by the Scottish Parliament, written into the statutes and the laws of Scotland. It would become the founding document of a new nation, and that would be accepted by the United Nations and all other countries. The constitution that Mark has written, I think, and the constitutions I've seen from Commonweal, these versions of the constitutions can be blended together to create something even better. By the time it's finished, I believe the Scottish Constitution would create probably the fairest and most egalitarian possible country that you can have. The idea is to create a constitution which establishes the best, fairest and most sustainable democracy on the planet, something which is an example for other countries to look up to, because Scotland has an opportunity here to write its constitution based on 21st century thinking. 21st century technology can be used in its democracy, can also be written into its constitution. And there's a lot of good things happening in Scotland at the moment, contrary to what's happening down south in Westminster at the moment, where chaos reigns supreme and where 10 Northern Irish Unionists are holding the entire country to ransom. And we could be on the brink of yet another crisis in Westminster and yet another emergency general election. Nobody knows for sure. The best outcome that we can hope for is a blind Brexit at the moment. That's the best outcome. So that's what the government is aiming for at the moment, to actually just exit the EU in an orderly fashion. That's all that they're trying to agree just now. And if they can do that, we would leave the EU in an orderly fashion, paying our bills without any ill feeling, but we would still have no trade deal. That would be something that would need to be negotiated later, because the British government has wasted 2 whole years doing absolutely nothing about it. Anyway, good news for Scotland about the Constitution. I will be speaking to Dr. Mark McNaught this afternoon, actually, and I'll be able to publish, he's given me permission to publish the entire Constitution, but I need at the moment to find a way of doing that that is easy enough to upload to Facebook and other pages so that you guys can have a look at it and discuss it online. So I'll be trying to do that over the next few days. Anyway, I'll see you all later. I've rambled on long enough, but have a good weekend. Sorry, I was going to say have a good weekend, it's not Friday yet. Have a good day today. I'll see you all tomorrow, and hopefully we will get this new constitution online so it can be discussed. Have a great day. See you later.